Hi, everyone. How's it going? Thank you for joining us on Adobe Live Pride Week. My name is San Lagos. I will be your host for today. I see already that there's a few people joining us on the chat. Thank you. Definitely, if you're on YouTube or on Behance, join the chat. It gets to be a lot of fun. So hi, Doris. Hi, General Kenobi. That is amazing. Hi, Sean. And hi, Sam. How's it going? So today we are joined by Toren Reaves. He is a creator, and today we were going to be working on something really cool. And I'm going to let him take on the stage here and invite him to let us know a little bit more about himself and his project.
Yeah, thank you, Sin, so much for having me and hosting me, and everybody who's in the chat already contributing. I hope to get to as many questions as you guys have in the time that I'm live.
Awesome. Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yes. So we already see here Francisco, Steve, Sam is just always on, like, joining us and keeping us, excited. So thank you for joining us here. If you have any questions, definitely join in on the chat and I'll be relaying the questions over to Toren.
Yeah, thank you. Can everybody see my screen okay? Oh, yeah, perfect. There we go. So we'll just expand this. But yeah, so today's project, I think, is best given with a little bit of context as to who I am and a bit about my story. So I'll try to be brief, but so I graduated from college in 2010 with a BA in English, and naturally started cage fighting as one does, and kind of found my footing and my placement in the world over the course of a few years of competing in boxing and jiu-jitsu and kickboxing and, like I said, MMA, and wound up at this really cool place in Rochester called the Community Place, which hired me to teach kids who were at risk so they could get their GED diplomas. And I think I was 24 at the time, and I had students as old as 28, and I was working with kids who, were really disenfranchised with the local public schooling system. And I actually was the beneficiary of being able to go to a pretty prestigious college prep school for my entire undergraduate career. And I just remember thinking, when I was working with those kids, like, there's nothing inherently special about me that would justify the opportunities that I had versus what they had. And a lot of my time there really had a pretty profound impact on me, and really paints a lot of what I do moving forward. And at that prep school, I was the only male person of color in my entire high school literally from ninth grade all the way till I graduated. And so I didn't really have too many Black male role models to look up to while I was there. And, when you're a teenager, you're already kind of dealing with just a lot. And so I think that, I definitely ran my teachers for a loop. And I don't think when I graduated, or by the time I graduated, I had a really good reputation as a student. And that's pertinent for what today's project is, because I went to, the school I went to was right in the suburbs of Rochester, which is a very affluent area. And then I lived on one of the worst streets in the entire city. And so today's project kind of speaks to that, that street that I'm from, because I'm in a place now professionally where I can kind of represent myself and my history in my own terms. And I would like to think that that's something that I really embody through all of my business practices, and something that hopefully touches a vein thematically with this month being Pride Month. I can't imagine what it's like. I was talking to a friend of mine who was telling me her journey about coming out from the closet. I can't even imagine what that process is like. And so just being able to sit and listen and learn, to have an experience where I have the privilege where I don't have to consider telling people what I'm into is just so different. And I always try to make sure that, I take those lessons to heart and make sure that, especially for this month, I'm not falling foul of some of the things we see larger brands do, where it feels like a bit of tokenism. But I'll talk more to that later. But as soon as I left the Community Place, I knew I wanted to do something in marketing. And I started at one of Rochester's more prestigious marketing agencies. And I felt like I had all this talent that was just kind of not being spent. And I learned a lot. I started as a paid search, like a pay-per-click specialist. And I thought like, okay, I'm going to start in paid search. I'm going to work my way to, being a content producer. And that was just not the track. And like my high school experience, I was the only person of color in the entire building. And so I bounced around a few agencies, and then right at the start of COVID, I lost my job and I started KESA. And it was, kind of like this real watershed moment for me where I felt like, okay, like I'm going to do this now on my own terms. And I actually kind of hit the ground running with a number of apparel brand clients, all very small, mostly friends of mine, but they needed content immediately, but couldn't afford the larger agencies that they were working with. And I kind of fit this perfect middle market. So I did my very first photo shoot with my cell phone. I had a Pixel 3 at the time, and I used Lightroom on mobile. And client sent me a bunch of T-shirts.
Team.
Yeah, Pixel Team. Video, not so much, but for photography, not so bad.
Nice.
But yeah. Video, it's like even today, I have the Pixel 6 Pro, and it's a rough journey. But I launched a campaign using these photos that I took. Like the same day, I got the T-shirts and the shorts in the mail, and that campaign just took off. And that was the first time I was like, okay, I'm validated. Like, let's do something with this. Like, I do know what I'm doing. Like, there is talent in there. And so I launched another campaign for that same brand where I labeled myself as an All-American. And I was super nervous about doing it because to look at me, I do not have the typical characteristics of who an All-American might be. It's very blonde-haired, blue-eyed, but I'm a pretty patriotic person, and I come from a military family, and my grandfather fought for America when it would not have done the same for him. And so it always bothered me that if somebody looked at me, they would never have assumed that I would fit that mold. And so I just gave it to myself. And that speaks to, that urgency in me to kind of represent myself on my own terms, and likewise with everybody who I work with. And so this campaign, it was nice to kind of put myself in the forefront because the CrossFit community is oddly conservative in some ways. And so while there were a lot of messages of support that really meant a lot, there were definitely a few that were wild. But I just don't let that kind of stop me whatsoever. And that client was in like, hey, you want to design some shorts for us? And I took that idea and ran, and those shorts were like a complete hit. I worked with the number 6 CrossFit athlete in the world, Jacob Heppner, to design a few different colorways. And yeah, it was like this thing I'd never done before, but was really successful at early on. And from there, I just kind of flourished. And so once I started designing for more and more apparel brands, and different, requests from clients kind of came across my desk, I promised myself I'd never say no to anything. And I would just teach myself how to do it. And that worked out to the point where I kind of caught this bug where I was designing apparel all the time. And so by, I think, February of 2021, I launched my very first shirt, and I called it Quiet Thirst and Blossom. And again, that street that I grew up on is Thurston Road. And I really felt like I was in full bloom, and I wanted to have my first shirt kind of veer from the status quo. I think, as a former MMA fighter and a current boxer and a CrossFit athlete, a fluorescent or a floral pink is not your first thought for a color that I go to. But again, like I really want to make sure that I'm embodying a lot of the values that I have through every project. And that started right with the shirt. Yeah. And it's really nice and liberating, and kind of, trying to represent or expand I think the prerequisite qualities of what we think is masculine or not, and just kind of dispelling some of those tropes. Because I work for myself and I'm my own client, like I don't have to worry about making me mad. So if it feels right to me, I'll go in that direction. And I can take a lot of risks when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like a nice experiment because you have a hold of the narrative, and then you have to sort of, what I'm hearing from you is like you have to be able to then have some insights of what is it that you believe in, and have some sensibilities for the world beyond you, right? So like your friend coming out, or your understanding of how to represent yourself as an American. Oh, I completely hear you on that end. Actually, Penny also really loves CrossFit, so she's on board with you on that front. So that's really, really cool. Can you tell us a little bit about how this begins to correlate to what inspired you to create the project today?
Yeah, so the project today, so this shirt was just for friends and family, and a lot of people ended up asking me for it. And so I launched my own little tiny apparel brand, and that took off. And today's project, I came out with a summer 21 and a fall 21 collection, and I'm rolling into the summer 22 collection and hopefully the fall 22 collection. And I wanted to do a project where I could kind of show clothes in a different manner. A lot of the client requests, they'll send me brand new shirts, and that's great. But actually, to be around, to survive as a business for this long is a point of pride. And so I wanted to take photos of the apparel on friends in whatever state it's in. And so it's a lot of weathered stuff. And today's project, I went back to my street, Thurston, and I used a friend of mine named Lex, who's modeled for me before. And she was actually wearing a lot of my shirts for this shoot. And so today we're going to be going through a bunch of photographs from that shoot that we did on Thurston, wearing the clothes that I've lived in and breathed in, and kind of roll into this next season. But I wanted to pay homage to last year. And it's tricky. Like, I want to not reuse out of a lack of creativity, but kind of reuse because we don't have to just leave things behind for the sake of leaving things behind. And I want to kind of speak to a more mindful consumptionist approach to things. And that's a hard box to check. I think if you're cynical at all, you can just say, well, he just colored the same shirt differently. And I've got new designs as well, but I did want to stop and say, listen, that I'm coming out with a second or a third season of apparel is wild to me. And I'm so proud of the fact that I've made it this far. So I'm going to load up Lightroom.
Yeah. Bravo.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I mean, I'm already super intrigued because one of my favorite things is to learn the behind the scenes of what really makes a company become what it is. I think there's so much that we see and sort of like in the front of it all, where we kind of forget the creators that brought up these ideas or the convictions that define the journey of that company. And it sounds really insightful. I'm really, really excited to see how you go through your process in Lightroom. Lightroom is one of my favorite Adobe programs, along with Photoshop, because it's master all. So I'm curious to see your workflow.
Thank you so much. And conviction's a great word. It's the perfect word, actually. So it's very insightful for you. Even my brand name, KESA, which is short for KESA Gatame. When I started jiu-jitsu back in 2010, that was like the first move that made sense to me. And as a white belt, I was catching black belts with it. And I think if you work in any industry for long enough, you kind of see behind the curtain, and you'll probably run into things that don't make sense to you. And so by naming my brand KESA, it was kind of like a promise to myself that whatever I do moving forward will always make sense to me. And if it doesn't, then there's no room for it. And I didn't think at the time how liberating that would be, but it saved me so much trouble and heartache. Like, I've never taken on a client that I didn't believe in, or I've never stuck with a project that didn't make sense, or if there's a business practice that felt untoward, I just don't do it. And it keeps me on the level, because even if something fails, I'm perfectly fine with being held accountable for it, because I know where it came from, and hopefully that's communicated with the actions that I take and the business practices, and all the way down to the models that I work with, and how I try to represent people to the best of my ability on their own terms. And as far as Lightroom goes, I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of experts in the chat, and you'll probably find I've got a very iterative approach. Like, I am just that that weirdo who just like, I like toggling things and just saying like, well, what works? Like, what am I trying to get mood wise? And again, this is like right on the corner of my street. So I'm ready to dive in. I figured at first we'd just go through some of the photos and I can kind of start selecting like which ones I want to work with a little bit today. And then we might edit our way through whatever we have time for, if that works for you guys.
Yeah, I also love that. Let's invite our chat here to collaborate with us. If y'all have any tips or out on YouTube, our YouTube community, if you guys have any tips on some of your favorite resources or features on Lightroom that you would like to share with us, and maybe we can explore some of those here live, definitely join the chat and I'll be reading those to Toren.
Yeah. And so this is a photo that is actually of me in front of my house on Thurston as a kid. And when I came out with that shirt, I designed a box that went with Quiet Thurston Blossom. And I wanted people, when they opened it, to feel like it was blooming. And so the inside of it is that photo in the background. And so I wanted to kind of have that mimetic response to opening. And I spent more time and money on the boxes than I did on the shirt itself. But so this is kind of my barometer for, like, I like that there's a little bit of grain and that, you know, the clarity is not the greatest, but the shadows are strong. It's a pretty warm photo. And so I'll probably lean in this direction, but of course I'm always open to deviating 100%. But I think for me, the idea for some of these photos at least is to kind of speak to that past in a way that's also a little bit more forward thinking. And this is again, Lex, hopefully it shows well. We might have to zoom out a little bit. But yeah, Lex is a complete force of nature. And she's a good friend of mine from Buffalo. Yeah, the first shoot that we did, I was so struck by, like, I think one of the more contemporary tropes of portrait photography that I have seen is kind of like this soft blank expression, which is totally fine. Like if you can make that work, like, God bless you, because I absolutely cannot. But whenever Lex is like looking at anything, it's like you can tell she's considering it at a very high degree. And I don't know, like when I look at something, like if you just catch a candid photo of me, I look completely confused because I probably am. But Lex is like the exact opposite. It's like she's thinking about something at a genius level. And I am so awestruck by it. And so most of my favorite photos of her historically have been just her like looking around and waiting for me to get my little act together.
I love when you have a subject or that also tends to be somebody familiar, so you have this like sort of interaction with them that is a little bit different. And I love that you're catching those little elements about her being challenging in a way. That's so cool.
No, I don't really work too often with paid models. And so like a lot of my friends are just like, hey, I've got like an afternoon, just because my schedule can be so wonky. It can actually be hard for me to be like, okay, in 6 months, I've got this like hard date set. And so for me as a photographer, I found early on, using mostly my friends and family, it was really important for me to just make the subject feel comfortable. And whatever happened, once we kind of cleared that hill, those were always the best photos. And so having a rapport with Lex, it's like, you ever like see directors that work with the same actors all the time? I used to just think that was so weird. And now like it totally kind of makes sense, because it's like once you find that person who like you groove with, like keep jamming with them. Like you can kind of keep going back to the well. I'm a fan of this photo. I don't know what the chat's thoughts are on it, but I think I'm just gonna kind of flag it for now. Usually when I'm selecting photos, I'll just give it like a 5 or like a 4-star, and then I'll flag it. And then at the end, I'll like sort by stars, and I'll start editing kind of based on that, if that works for everybody. But if there's a photo or a frame that really jumps out at people, please let me know.
Yeah, I really dig this. It has such a urban energy about it. And I think that your clothing also has that. I don't know if that was intentional, but it's really cool.
So this shirt, it's based on one of my favorite Muhammad Ali shirts. It was actually when he was actually called Cassius Clay. And he had this really great shirt with a very similar font where the C kind of went over both. And that was one of the first like shirts I bought for myself when I started fighting, and I trained in it all the time, and I still have it somewhere. It's literally like blood stained and just gnarly, but I wanted to have my own version of that, just kind of speaking to Thurston and just that toughness that I associate with it. But yeah, she's just an intense person.
I just want to do a quick shout out to the chat. Hi Receipts, hi Ismael. If you're just joining us, we are here with Toren Reaves, and he's taking us through his workflow and also all of his insights on how he produces his marketing work for his clothing line. And so far we're looking at some really cool shots. So if you have some questions, definitely drop them in the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. One of the things that I look for when I'm going through frames is the expression telling a story? Am I interested in the background? Am I interested in the colors? Am I interested in the lighting? Like if I can check that box for every one of those elements, I'll go, okay, like there's something here. And because I end up cropping things for different uses, like I might have a LinkedIn banner, or I might which is very wide, as you know, but still narrow, or I might have like the new Instagram portrait, which is what's that ratio? Is it like a 4:5 or something like that?
Yeah, it's a 4:5.
Yeah. So like sometimes
1350 by 1080, I want to say.
Oh my God,
it's one
you're
of
a
those.
genius.
You have to keep it in your head.
Oh my God, no, you're a genius. And I'm super envious that you can remember that. But yeah, sometimes I'll try to find photos where I think some cropping highlights something in particular. So like I've found there are so many photos that when I'm going through, I'm like, this is it, this is the one. And then when I have to go to crop, it's like, this doesn't quite work. And a photo that I didn't necessarily love might just have that element, like just that angle that's really, really breathtaking. And so I try to like never dismiss something on first glance or fall too in love with it because it's not necessarily working out right away. But I love this photo.
I totally relate to that. I think sometimes the cropping becomes this new opportunity to recompose your shot in post and give it a new kind of like energy. I love doing cropping. Sometimes I spent a lot of time in that. So I totally get that.
Yeah. Cropping and then placing the logo like on the center. That is my favorite exercise, like overlaying font on an image. And I really like placing font like in a position, we'll probably do more of this tomorrow, that kind of bothers you a little bit. Like if you just scooted it over like an inch, like I like it way more. Because I think that if you're engaged in it to that degree, then you're really spending some time with it. And I think that that's a good thing by and large. But yeah, I love.
Oh my God, you're such an outlaw. You're like, I want to break the rules. But the rule is to break the rules.
Oh, no. Well, see, because I'm self-taught, like I always tell people, like, because I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what can't be done. And so I had a conversation with another local design firm, and they were like, well, do you know all these like rules about graphic design? And I was like, no, like, I don't know shit. Like I just do what I like. Like that
refreshing.
Is exactly what, yeah. No, me feeling it is my own barometer of, does this work or not?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And just like everybody on the chat, I think that's a great advice to take in. I think it can be a bit almost like daunting to tackle any of these programs or jump into a new craft that you might be interested in, maybe photography, maybe marketing, maybe you want to design your own clothing line. I think Toren's advice here on just being able to trust that being a novice is actually kind of a good thing, and being able to trust your gut in that respect, take note. I think that's wonderful. Golden nuggets right there.
Yeah. I always tell people, because I do a lot of work now with different agencies to increase the number of by POC hires. And one of the exercises that I kind of offer to them is like, if you just go through, some 19-year-old's Instagram feed and it speaks to you, that kid has something like going on as far as taste is concerned that they may not even know is like a marketable skill. And so many of us are already so creative. Like the kids that I work with now and I do volunteer education for, they already are like fluent in this design language without any really thought about it. and they're so good at framing things and trusting their own instincts. And so I always try to let people know, like, my barometer for success is really like, does this speak to me? Like, do I mess with this? Like, is this something that I really, really like? Because you can have, it's so hard to tell, like, will this campaign go well or will it not? Like, all that stuff just almost seems arbitrary. But if before I even said it live, like, if I really love the work that I did, then whatever comes after that is icing on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting to observe children learn something brand new, and it's almost like, well, how can I go back to that foundation of being able to trust my instinct? And also, once you learn something, being able to say, okay, I'm gonna let that go, allow that to be kind of in the back of my brain, and just feel it as an instinct as opposed to let me follow that rule, because it can be stifling, right? It's like the whole idea is to be creative, so it should be fresh ideas from wherever it comes from. Yeah, I also like the fact, I was just gonna say earlier, by trusting your own instinct, I think you're probably, as a consequence, relating to other folks that have that same experience as you. So you're being really, you're honoring that experience and within your work. So you're able to relate to other people that, amongst so many people that we can have that are actually genuinely connected to your brand.
Yeah, no, that's really insightful, and I've never thought of it that way. But yeah, and I think that that's one of the many reasons why, like, representation and advertising is so important, and why I'm such an advocate for it. In Rochester, as of last year, there were more ad agencies locally than there were Black men employed by them, and that's just crazy to me in 2021. And so I brought that statistic to light on LinkedIn, and then tagged all the local agencies in it, and then did that on Facebook and Instagram. And they weren't happy at first, but everybody reached out right away. And now we're doing, like, development programs to increase the representation throughout the office. And yeah, I'm also a firm believer, and this goes back to the overall theme about, like, representing yourself in your own terms, that it's not enough to just be the token Black person in the office. Like, I want Blackness to be allowed in the office, if that makes sense. And I wonder if you felt that being within marginalized communities yourself.
Yes. Yes, so interesting to say the way you just said that, because it does, it goes back to to a moment where I used to say that there's that energy that is part of your culture that can sometimes be like the volume gets turned down a little bit, right? Regardless of if you represent yourself as Latino, Latinx, for example. I can't escape it. I'm really brown. I look Latina, my curls, I don't know, maybe my accents, right? You probably hear it. And then there's the fact that maybe when you go into places, that energy, that culture can be tossed to the side, and it's just more professional or more proper to represent this angle. So I get that. I get where you're coming from that perspective. And I love that we're having all these conversations. I love that we have a community here, even today, being able to celebrate Pride Month, right? Like, wow. Yeah. I love that Behance is like, yes, let's get colorful. Let's just talk about all these subjects and showcase how our work represents these conversations. And so, yes, really, really beautiful. I have a comment here from Jeremy on regards to Lightroom. He has an advice for you. So one of the things that he does is he uses 1 stars as a way to reject a frame, which is interesting. So that's cool. I sometimes do that too. Like 3 stars is a maybe, more or less. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. No, I usually do 5 stars in the flag, because it's like, oh, I love this. And then if I'm if I'm on that maybe, I'll use a 4. But I'm always reluctant to go lower than that, because in my little heart, I'm like, well, what if somebody saw that I gave this photo of them a 1 star? Will they think I don't think that they're beautiful or or attractive?
Somewhere down in history.
Yeah, it's I don't want you to ever stumble upon that. I'd feel terrible. So I usually go with a high mark and then just kind of go back through. And there have been so many times where I've been I did a project, I finish it, and then 8 months goes by, and it's let me revisit this. And some of the frames I didn't mark at all suddenly just have this like new use and purpose, and I'm like obsessed with them.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah. So I've
It's
always reluctant
revisiting
to use
your
them to zero.
archives. Yeah, revisiting your archives is really vital. I'm glad you do that too, because you never know what you reject, and then you see a new opportunity down the road.
Yeah, Sin, I'm
And
so glad
also
you mentioned that. Oh, no, please go ahead.
that little flag that says rejected, that's hard for me to use.
Yeah, it's tough. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I wouldn't reject anybody. But no, so I'm a chronic screenshotter or like picture saver. Like if I see something, I save it. And I just put together, for my last two collections, I put together an editorial kind of like on the inspiration behind them. And so I've got screenshots and like JPEGs literally from 2001. And I went through everything that composed this editorial, and it was just organizing all that stuff was such a massive undertaking. But yeah, I love revisiting work, and it was so like funny. Like there were a few pictures that I knew in my mind I had in a folder somewhere, and like went on the hunt for it for like hours. And then when I found it, I was like, oh, this is like resolution from 2004. I have to refine this photo like at an actual decent resolution now. So it was crazy.
So what do you like using at the moment to archive your photos? Because as a photographer, I imagine there's plenty of that you need to be able to store.
Yeah, so Lightroom does a lot of the heavy lifting. I have I have everything backed up on like Microsoft OneDrive. I have hard drives stuff. And then likewise, I have like a Google Photos account and like my Google Drive. So there's like a lot of redundancies just in case something happens. But yeah, I'm like one of those people, like when I get a new phone, I keep the other one pristine. And so it was really cool to go back to like my iPhone 4S from 2010 and just like scroll through all the screenshots. And Instagram looked so different back then. But
oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I'm always
talk
like
about
making
rebranding.
I'm always trying to bring the past or at least represent it in what I'm doing moving forward.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about Lightroom versus Lightroom Classic.
Oh, wow.
The ability of having my images stored in the cloud. So to some extent, I know they're there safely if all else fails. And just being able to have access to them. I don't know if you ever play with Lightroom on the iPad or on your device. That accessibility is like wonderful for me, for my workflow.
Yeah, so likewise.
I welcome you to use it if you haven't used it.
Yeah, it's especially important for me on my phone because you can look at something on a monitor all day and it's like, okay, like this giant image on this giant screen looks a certain way. But then when I like look at it on my phone, I'm like oh, like this isn't translating, or like the colors are completely different. And so I've been really considering switching back to an iPhone just because that's like the most ubiquitous screen. That's how most people see most images ever. And that would definitely be a good touch point for me to just kind of have in my pocket all the time, just to make sure that all the editing I'm doing is translating on the medium that it's most likely to be seen on. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know how true that is. That the majority of people use iPhones. I have encountered a lot of people with Androids, so I would be really curious to not or like in Asia, there's a lot of people that use Androids. I went to Costa Rica recently, and I just kept seeing people with Android phones. And I have no sides whatsoever. I've used both at some point. I mean, I love my Google Pixel, but I have had that question in my mind, like being able to be in a place like Costa Rica and knowing that even here there's a person browsing potentially your work in a different language altogether. But you know, it's kind of intriguing, I guess, from a cultural aspect, from a just a study of like how we behave as humans, to be able to know that's a thing. It was a bit mind-boggling for a little bit there.
Yeah, no, that's great insight. I think because there are so many variations of Android phones that any one display kind of might get kind of lost in the weeds, but just as in terms of like this is the display that we're all using. I guess I was under the assumption that it was Apple, but no, you're totally right. Like in different places, like I know in Africa they use like a ton of Samsung. Like that's just the brand. And so it's crazy to learn about those differences.
Right.
But yeah, actually, so my mom's house, or the house I grew up on, is like right behind this tree. So this is like a complete trip. And we did this photo shoot without, like, we drove there, did this shoot and left. And I was like, okay, if my mom comes outside and sees us, like, it's going to be a half hour of us talking to her about embarrassing stories. So I'm just going to like try to do this covert op style. And it completely worked. I love this.
I love that like environment. Just being able to do that vanishing point is a good select there.
Yeah. But yeah, she always looks just like so locked in. And these were shorts that I came out with shortly after I launched that shirt. And I love naming things. And so I designed 3 pairs of shorts based on like the first 3 dates me and my wife went on. And on our very first like major date, she was driving me someplace and I was like, where are we going? She goes, Niagara Falls. And I was like, well, how are we going to cross the border? Like, I don't have my passport. And she's like, no, I've got it. I was like, where did you
That's amazing. Wow.
It's like a felony. Like I barely know you. So yeah, that was so these shorts are called Remember Our First Date. And so I took the hex code from photos of us so cool. At the falls and just try to make that color embodied into that. Yeah. Ooh. So I'm
beautiful.
These are like a very emotionally tethered pair of shorts to me. And when I was designing them, she was like, you should have a logo right there. And I was like, sure. And so I put the word sure right on the shorts because I couldn't think of what else to put. It was a placeholder, and it turns out I actually liked the way it looked. And so that's her super, like, she's just off the cuff, like, great contribution. So it speaks to that, like, just what people feel in their hearts, like when they just say it, that can be the best design cue that you get.
Do you find yourself sharing your portfolio work on Behance and putting snippets of that story? Because I'm like super intrigued the storyline of like creating some an apparel, but like beyond just the working part, but like I love that sentimental touch to it.
Yeah, so the editorial I was speaking about earlier, the refraction, the expanded version is up on Behance. And that started out, I was talking to a pretty big brand, and they said that they liked my apparel designs, but likewise, they didn't know how I got there. And so they're like, can you just put together like a little something for us to kind of explain like what your creative process is? And so that little like nugget, it was a great idea. And that little nugget turned into a 200 and something page editorial that like I've spent the last 6 months obsessing over. And so it definitely, without being too on the nose, I hope, kind of guides people. Like I'd like to show like this was the vibe, and then this was where I ended up. And like I like to let people kind of come to their own conclusions about it. But there are a few times where I'm a little bit more direct or declarative in how I came to what I ended up designing. But yeah, that's it's fascinating to see that stuff.
Yeah, I love sharing on Behance directly from Lightroom too. So I've whenever you guys are completed with something on a project on Lightroom, that's a little tip or feature that I had no idea existed. And I was like, wait, hold on. I can just grab everything from here. Yeah. And it's like, I've been on Behance since forever, and it feels like so many things have changed. There's so many little cool features now that just like start surprising me. So
no, that's such great insight. I'm pretty new to Behance, so it's cool to hear like how there are still little like tricks hidden like underneath the corners. And when I stumbled upon that you could add your Spotify playlist, I put that right in that editorial of mine. Cause I'm like weird. Like I'll listen to the same song on repeat for hours because I'm trying to like live in that vibe when I'm designing or like photo grading or doing any color correction. And so I was like, okay, here's a playlist of all the songs that I had on loop, like during this entire past year of working. And so that's right at like the top of the editorial. And Behance is so awesome. Like if you think about all the negative sentiments people have towards social media as a whole, Behance is like the one social media platform where everybody on there is just kind of with it and very supportive and encouraging. Like I haven't stumbled upon any negativity whatsoever. And I'm sure that maybe it exists somewhere, but that by and large, you can go on there and spend a fair amount of time just looking at stuff that's all kind of curated to help you be more creative and to add something to your day-to-day is something that that Adobe should really be proud of.
Yeah, I love hearing that. I love hearing that because I feel the same exact way and haven't had a bad experience at all. It's like
Yeah.
it's almost become a space to hone in on the kind of audience, my target audience, which, that's the branding technical term, but in reality, I just want to connect with people like me, people who have still that love for the craftsmanship of design and graphic design and other designs out there, other disciplines that involve creativity, which I totally find on Behance, where maybe in places like Instagram and Facebook, all those things, it's a bit more saturated with other things. So it's not as true to like the craftsmanship, somebody just oozing over, oh, I love this editing style that you did on these images. Like, yes, that's the conversation I want to have about how we create different styles. Which, by the way, I'm curious to see how you edit these images. Do you transform them quite a bit, or do you like just improving the quality of the image?
So I can start going into some editing pretty soon. I think we've got a pretty fair selection of photos that I'm into. So yeah, let me sort this by star rating. And yeah, I mean, it varies. There have been times where I felt like I played it a little safe. And then there have been times where like I really pushed it and I was like, okay, this is kind of surreal. Really, I just try to go with what feels right. And there have been times where I found a look that was very different than what I ended up with like long term. Like I go through entire like production of this is like the look, and then I revisit it like we talked about, and then go, well, now that I've learned some stuff, let me like take another whack at this, and then I completely change it. But yeah, for this one, again, just kind of going back to this reference photo, like I do want to have a somewhat nostalgic feel. So I can definitely see me kind of maybe playing around with like the luminance a bit with the greens. Like there are a couple colors that I'm a big fan of, and I like greens for whatever reason, and like blues. They make my heart so happy. Like I'm such a huge fan. So like there are a lot of times where it's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna start here and see what kind of happens, and hopefully this translates a little bit over the stream. And if it doesn't, my apologies for sure. But like I'll play around with like the hues of the greens. I think the darker it starts to look a little bit more candy-ish. And I think for this, like I want a warmer photo because Rochester, for those who are unaware, has like an 11-month winter, and so summers are so special to me. Like it will snow in May. Like you can mess around and it'd be like, yeah, we're about to get 11 inches of hard snow May 16th. Yeah, it's the absolute worst. Like whenever you think you've escaped it, it's like Jason, where it's just walking behind you forever. And so when we do have
perpetual snow.
Yeah, perpetual snow. So summers are super important to me, and I definitely want to speak to that with this project where things are maybe a little bit warmer, but not like too warm. I might.
So are you picking that reference from that image, that photo that you just put? I think it just came up there. Is that your reference point?
Kind of like, so when I like speak to reference points, like I think that there are people who are way more technically proficient than I am who will go, that's the value of green in that photo. I will make that the value of green in the other photos that we're working on now. For me, like a reference point is like, again, like very loose term, like just like what was the vibe in that photo? Like what emotion am I getting from this? What's it making me feel? And then how can I take those feelings and use the techniques that I've learned and put those in here the best that I can. So sometimes I end up designing very far away from that. And that's totally valid as well.
Yeah, definitely. I like that it's not too specific. So that way you have room for different creativity and you allow yourself some room.
Yeah. But yeah, again, these are all my clothes. Actually, I'm wearing this shirt right now and these sweats. And I love that like Lex is always down to because for my brand, everything is unisex to the best of my ability. A lot of the manufacturers will have different cuts for different genders, but I didn't want anybody to feel left out with the apparel that I was making.
Oh,
And so
yes.
I try to like speak to that with the sort of clothes that I have on the models. And again, like just sort of the connotations of how I'm posing people or the poses that they're in and where I'm shooting from. Like, I don't want anything to be exploitative. And I think that there's a way to be appealing and attractive in a way that's not necessarily tropey, if that makes sense. And to the best of my abilities, I try to find that. And then before I set anything live, like I always check in with the model and go like, do these photos work for you? And if they say no, then we have to move away from them. And that's totally fine. Like, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. I love those sweats, by the way.
Thank you. I will have to send you a pair.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. I think it's one of the hardest things to do is shop for neutral clothing that feels like it's not too specific to a certain idea of what my personality is supposed to be or so on. Sometimes I step into like a guy's outlet and I think to myself, but come on, I love all these color palettes and I love all these patterns. What happened? And even if I think I have a special relationship with like my tailor, because if I think, oh, maybe I can remake this, I can, change the sleeves so they're a little bit smaller and it'll fit me just right. And I love the bagginess anyhow. But it's one of those things where I love and appreciate that you're taking that into account and you have a sensibility for it, because those things only develop from there. And just keep yourself aware of those things. And I'm sure eventually you'll find this aha moment that apparently every other outlet hasn't. So
no, it's I appreciate it. It's good to hear that the effort, like, it does mean something to people. Like when you just spend the extra time being a little bit more thoughtful, because I think a lot of times, like, you don't realize if you're kind of the privilege where they always have clothes that fit me. I'm 6 foot, like typical body.
Wow.
Like it's not like like they always kind of have stuff that is tailored to my build for the most part, except for pants. I have to get those tailored because my legs are kind of big, but I don't have to worry about, well, does like the colors that I like, are they offered in my cut in a way that I find flattering or a way that I like. And so to think about that as a designer with my own brand, it definitely makes me feel good to know that people do appreciate it. And it's kind of bittersweet because I wish it was more ubiquitous. With this one, I think I'm going to make it a little bit brighter. I love a good bright photo. I don't know if this is at the warmth that I would like quite yet, but it's always tough. Like sometimes it'll look not too warm. Like, and then when I look at it on my other screen, it's very saturated. And I'm not always the biggest fan of like an oversaturation. And then that's when you kind of hit this crossroad of like, well, which one is it? Like, do you want it to be warm or do you want it to be desaturated? And sometimes I just want both. I also love playing around with like the midtones, like doing like tone splitting. Like this is so fun for me. I think especially with the midtones, like sometimes you can really tell like a fun little story in here. Like when you have some of the like the more pink or purple midtones, it just makes things seem a little bit sweeter. I don't know. Like I'm a fan of what that looks like. But yeah, to all the like the real like photo editors who are like, I can't believe, like I literally just go off of like, does that look cool? And then I'll do like Control Z, and then I'll go back and I'll literally flick back and forth. And then once I find settings that I kind of like, then you'll see me start to copy paste them onto other photos. And another exercise I do, so if I'm not just going to like manually go through each dial, sometimes I'll go through some of the photos that I took in the past and go, okay, like, well, how did I solve this problem before? And this is a photo actually I took when I was in Japan back in 2016. And I really just like, I love this haze.
Yeah, Japan.
Yeah. It was awesome. Yeah, I went there to go to fight when back in 2016, and that was a
MMA?
really cool time. Yeah. It was I had this like very Street Fighter-esque like life fantasy where I was like, I'm just going to knock on the doors of all these MMA gyms in Japan and just see who wants to get busy. And that's literally what I did. Like I just Google mapped like my favorite 5 gyms and I went there and everybody was super cool and we got some work and it was
yeah.
it was
My wife and I
awesome.
went to watch her cousin play at an MMA tournament, and in it we're also little kids. So it's really, really
Yeah.
amazing the way the entire audience supported, even from the kids to the women to the big men that obviously have been like there for a long, long time. And it was just like so energetic. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be a good vibe. It can also be kind of like a weird one sometimes if you stumble across the wrong crowd. But for the most part, I'm always really happy with how people conduct themselves at those events, and there's so much respect between fighters. And I think a lot of my urgency to represent people equally is like if you look at MMA as a sport, there aren't very many other examples of sports that like women will frontline a main like they'll be the main event and be like the title fight on the card and they'll take up 90% of the poster that other male fighters are like the undercard for, and nobody thinks anything of it. Like, Joanna Jędrzejczyk is one of the most respected fighters, period. Not like because like not amongst women or not because of her weight class, but just flat out period. And when you train MMA, it's the same vibe in the gym. Like everybody just kind of gets it in that one way. And so to kind of have those barriers be not a problem or not be a hurdle, I think is a cultural vibe that I'm very much about.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Especially in sports. It's not really the standard for other sports. So it's absolutely notable.
no. And like, even when I fought, like I shared the same locker room with female fighters. Like we were backstage, like getting ready. It didn't matter. Like I was so locked into, what have I got myself into that I didn't really have time to think about anything else. Like what on earth?
Yeah.
Like I completely am about to ruin my own day. But yeah, this photo was from Iceland. My wife and I went for our honeymoon. And again, I think it's kind of probably becoming prevalent. I really like hazier photos. But this was a series of photos that I think if we like revert back to the original settings, very boring. And then I punched this up a lot. And sometimes I like just seeing like, okay, well, what would it look like in one of these pictures if I did the same? So let me go back to, where was I? Like even here.
Yeah. It has a similar light condition. So you're able to play with that same filter. That's cool. Just adjust it.
And
ooh,
like
that
sometimes
looks really nice.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. So we're gonna flag this 5 stars.
I even like the cones in the back being like this pungent orange.
Yeah. But I think what I like about this color treatment is that it's kind of hard to peg like what year did this take place. If that makes any sense. Like it's a little bit more ambiguous.
Yeah.
Because some
Sam
photos
says,
I feel. Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, Sam says those colors adjustments made a huge difference. Yeah, it looks kind of different, but not in the way where it just starts to look like, fantasy. It still relates to like an urban environment.
Yeah, it's
really
grounded. Cool. Yeah. I don't know if you are familiar with, like, I love the Kendrick Lamar album, Good Kid, Mad City. And I love like how on the front of that album, he has a picture, it looks like a Polaroid of like, I'm assuming his family's Dodge Caravan, and just how grainy and beat up that photo is. And that was one of the first times that it kind of dawned on me, like, you can be proud of something that isn't necessarily of the highest technical quality and still make art of it. Like it's
Absolutely.
Very artfully placed. And I think like I am not a fan of gatekeeping in any regard. And so the more things that like I can do and practices that I can embody that kind of validate more approaches to art and to photography or graphic design, I think are better. And that album cover was very important to me in that regard, where I was like, oh, somebody's taking this type of photo and putting it front and center of what's a top 10 album of all time in terms of rap.
It's really reminiscent to one of my favorite bands, the Black Keys. the cover is also a nostalgic image of a vehicle. I don't know why we have such a fascination with like vehicles, trains, airplanes. It's like anything that takes us somewhere, it's like, let's take a photo of it. But yeah, that's really important that you keep in mind that, you know, it doesn't have to be always technically sound or a certain class level. In fact, those things are really kind of contradictory to being genuine to like the real life experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, one day I think I have this idea that one day we're going to look at like these iPhone 4, 3, whatever images. I have some of those and say, wow, like that is the film of today. You know, that is that nostalgia energy of maybe 2040 or 2060, who knows? But the way technology moves.
No, it's funny that you mentioned that because I had somebody interview me for a position as like a photography, like assistant photography something, and they asked me what my thoughts were on like iPhone photography. But definitely, like, you ever have somebody ask you a question that feels like it's kind of coming from like a high tower? That's how it felt. And I was like, listen, like if you're making stuff that speaks to you and speaks to other people, whatever tools you use to get there, like I'm fine with. Like there are definitely limitations like with the iPhone, just in terms of like, well, what can I do with this image from like a technical standpoint, because so much is kind of pre-baked in, but you could shoot raw on an iPhone if you want to. And likewise with the Pixel, and they were not a fan of that response. And so kind of out of spite, I went back to my LG G3, which was like a phone I had back in 2014. And I was like, okay, let me take all these photos from trips that I took and kind of use them in Lightroom and then kind of put them out there just to see how people receive them. And that album on Behance is like the one that people like the most. And it's like, nobody knows. Every photo here. Yeah, I'll pull it up. But like actually it might be my Japan trip. Hold on, let me.
Yeah, I'm looking at your Behance here. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, the Japan times.
Oh yeah, the Japan by KESA. So every one of these photos I took on an LG G3. And nobody knows that. But it's like, you really can like, again, like, would you use this photography for like a super high resolution display? Like maybe not. Like, again, there are limitations, but I was able to, with just my mobile device back in 2016, create something that moved me at least. And again, like, I'm a big fan of like, let's tear down these barriers to entry. That's my brother, by the way. And he's a big fan of skateboarding, and he was the inspiration behind me. I thought it was you. No, my younger brother. But he was a huge inspiration for me to make a KESA skateboard. And that ended up being like the best tool ever, because I'm very shy. Like if I'm taking photos of myself, I need to be like away from people, which is why there are always like these big, vast open spaces and then just me. Like I need to be able to cook for a half hour unbothered. But when people do drive by, if I have my skateboard out, I can just kind of pretend like, I'm making a skate video, and everyone just like, yeah, that's what he's doing here. And they just they don't think anything of it. Yeah. So the skateboard's been like an actual tool. But yeah, this is I really love this album. And this trip was awesome. This was a really, really cool time. This might be my favorite photo of the bunch.
That's so cool. Yeah, if you guys you're welcome to go check out his Behance. I think it's super cool to be able to go and appreciate the creatives that are out there and kind of leave a connection. I make a lot of connections on Behance, and I've gotten a lot of really cool connections with people that are international, which to me is like, in itself is amazing, because for a while we couldn't travel that much. And I feel like being able to use the internet for all of the amazing resources that it has it's the name of the game. So definitely check out Behance and go follow KESA.
Yeah. And I think one of the first projects I put up on there, when somebody liked it for the first time, I was like, who's that? And then I looked, and they had all these followers, and they were like a legit artist. And I was like, oh my, like, because I am self-taught, and like when I started KESA, I really had no clue what I was doing. So to just get that validation of like, good luck, homie, like you're onto something, like people who are more established don't realize like how impactful that can be in a good way. And if I wasn't on Behance, I don't think I would have had that moment where I was like, okay, somebody who's really in the weeds here saw some value in what I'm attempting to do, even though I don't necessarily know what that is or how to get there. And whatever opportunities that I can take now as somebody with a little skin in the game to validate others. Like I definitely, I'm a big proponent of it. But yeah, Lex is just the coolest. She's so cool.
Yeah, we're just a fan of her here.
Yeah, she is just the coolest. She's so nice.
Hi Mervin. Thank you for joining us.
So you do graphic design?
Yes. So I it's very hard to call myself a multidisciplinary when I have an accent, but I like saying that I'm a visual storyteller because I think much like you, I love focusing on just like the different stories that surround me and how I respond to them in a creative, expressive way. I think my medium is visual above all, but that medium uses different vehicles. Sometimes it's camera, sometimes it's design like vector items, or nowadays it's a bit of immersive technology. I've been really intrigued by that. And video too is very self-taught as well. So I love this new community that we have where like it's not rare to run into someone who has applied the discipline of stepping into spaces like this, like Behance or, YouTube, wherever we can access education from other creatives. And that's what I've done. And I'm going to go on a whim here and say that you've done plenty of that too. The internet is a wonderful resource. And so, I do a little bit of all of that. And I also live stream here on Behance, and it's a little bit of everything that I just mentioned: illustration, doodling on the iPad, just having a good old chat with people out here on Behance. So it's a lot of fun.
No, you're doing a great job, and thank you so much for being such a great host. And sorry that I'm not more familiar with all the awesome stuff that you've been up to, but I will definitely get up to speed. Yeah. So I do have like little presets from other photo shoots that I've done. Like I'll make, like if I find like a setting that I'm really, really into, I'll save it. And then sometimes I'll just literally just like flick through, just like we were before, just go, okay, like do any of these jump out to me? And if the chat has any of like that they're a fan of, let me know. But these are all from like older shoots.
So organized.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Which is your favorite?
My favorite?
Or like you use the most, maybe?
Last summer, it was this one. There's another, I did like a shoot with like an Olympic lifter named Faith, and she is the most intense person I've ever been around. And she's like 19. And I was so like, this person's awesome. And so the photos from that shoot were really, really impactful in that way. And when I was doing the photo shoot, I was at this like weightlifting, like this Olympic lifting gym, but it's really like a barn. And it was all women who were Olympic lifters, and none of them knew me besides my contact there. And so like, I'm trying to get all these really cool angles with my camera. And it was, a little embarrassed to say, it was like the first time I really stopped to consider like what I'm asking of these women who are lifting 200-300 pounds overhead, to trust this stranger with a camera at weird angles, to just not be untowards. And I really value that as a photographer. Like that inherent trust is really, really important to me. And I just like in the moment, I was like, oh my goodness, like I am asking a lot of these athletes to perform and to trust me, and they have no clue where these photos are going. And so that photo shoot was really, really important to me. And I love the photos from that shoot. Yeah.
Do you kind of build a sense of trust of like the person, but also like what the action is, like what's happening? There's no better way of being present than photographing sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the best photographers, because I'm really reluctant to call myself one, to be honest with you. Like I think the best photographers can like have a clear idea and then execute on it, like at a high degree of accuracy. And I just kind of like, I'm a stumble upon photographer. Like there are moments like this one where it's like, I can't believe I was around for this and then I happened to take a photo of it. Like they're all moments that happened to me, less so than they're like these planned things. And so I'm reluctant to let go of that feeling, because every time like I'll go through and forgot that I took this, or this picture occurred. And it's like, man, like that was a special second and it's right here.
That's
I get to
beautiful.
keep it forever.
I love calling a picture that a picture occurred. It just appeared.
Yeah, no, but that's how I feel. Cause it's like, if I had set out to take this picture, I would have come back empty handed. Like that's just kind of how my brain works, but that I was able and present enough in the moment to just hit the shutter on my camera. And this was the result. It feels so accidental. Like I'm reluctant to take any credit for it really. And I love, like I can spend hours in Lightroom just kind of playing around with these, but I think I was playing around with the midtones before, and these ones seem to be much warmer. And I think I was a fan of like the pinkish red ones for some reason. Those were speaking to me. And,
so we have a question here from Mervin, which I think we kind of touched on a little bit, but he is really curious on how to organize the original and edited photos. Maybe we're talking about like the Lightroom albums, or what is your workflow for organizing your final images once they're edited? Yeah. And also Anika says, hi, Toren.
Oh, hi. So yeah, there are a couple of approaches that I have. One thing I love about Lightroom is you can always revert back to the original. So you can spend hours on something, duplicate it, and then go, okay, well, I want the original one kind of right next to it. So I'll have the original one and then I'll just revert to original settings. As far as like storage goes, if it's like a big shoot, I'll export from my SD card into like a giant folder, and I'll call it like raw images, and I'll name it after the shoot. And then I'll go through each one of those images and copy paste it to another folder called selects, like the ones I like the most. And then from selects, I'll import those into Lightroom, and then I'll export those as like selects treated, and then selects treated and cropped, and then so on and so forth. Like, and then if I put my branding on it, I'll have like a folder called selects treated, cropped, and branded. And I'll just go through each one of those iterative folders, and then you end up having a ton of redundancies and it takes up a lot of space. But to me, it's worth it, just because, again, like I do revisit the past so much. I would be heartbroken if like I rendered a photo out at like a lower web resolution and then just deleted the original and never could go back to it for a different use. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes me think also it's fair to say that at some point, once your company grows exponentially, which I have my backing on, I will, because yes,
thank you.
You hope to be able to delegate those files to somebody that can find them. So I think that organization is, I mean, as a graphic designer, I'm always like drooling over somebody who organizes their folders. It's like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, it can be tough. Like once you start sharing with people and like just having like a common naming scheme, like for like I'll have the brand and then the shoot and then the photo and then the aspect ratio and then where the placement's supposed to go. Because having to send them off to clients, like I have a few clients that like to post themselves. And early on, I would send the client like the photo cropped in a certain way and with all the little tricks that I did in Lightroom. And then they would go onto Instagram and like put their own filters on it and then crop it funny. And it drove me nuts. So I would be like, okay, like let me just organize this for you, because I cannot. It's like making somebody like a beautiful meal and then they just squirt ketchup all over it. It's like, why did you do this?
And then
it's like
they mix it.
Yeah, it's like I plated this for hours. I used the tweezers. Like, how dare you?
I feel that way when they add salt before trying it. It's like, don't add salt. Try it first.
I would slap the fork out of their hand and say no. It's not allowed.
Yeah, I'm totally referring to my wife right now. So she adds salt. It's everything.
No, I'm half Italian, and one night for some reason I couldn't find pasta sauce, and my wife just went to squirt barbecue sauce on pasta, and I like died. I was like, what? Like what are we doing? Like
that
this
sounds
is illegal.
Pretty amazing, kind of. Yeah, borderline.
It's I don't know, but yeah, she's like, no,
Annika's here laughing with us. Annika,
I
how do you make your pasta? Very important.
Yeah, I don't want to lose all the shadows and details. So when we go back, yeah, this might be a little exposed. But yeah, I love that this shirt has some wear and tear to it. There are other shirts from the shoot that I think also have some like wear. Like I train in the shirt, like I box in the shirt, do MMA rounds in it. And so I had to warn Lex beforehand. I was like, if this smells like a dude in his mid-30s who's doing too much, I apologize. And she goes, it's all right.
What is that store? There's a store that sells like secondhand it's particularly shirts, and then they'll find like Tupac shirts, like shirts just from way back, and it's like you just think, oh my god, such a treasure, but also it has that level of wear and tear. Yeah. It's kind of interesting that we still find that valuable. So yeah, it's nice. There's something about it. Sometimes it just looks too fresh. It's just this, it's not the vibe you're going for.
Yeah, sometimes you just like, it's like, oh, this had a life. And I don't know what that life was, but it went through it. And it's cool to kind of inherit that feel.
Oh, Sean. Hi, Sean. Sean says, love a photo occurrence. Ooh, so fancy. I shot a corporate meeting, all candids, and ended up with one of my best shots ever. I didn't expect that. Yeah. What do you think about candid shots?
See, I'm a huge fan of candid shots, especially like, so if I have a client that has like a CrossFit brand, like, and they send me shirts to go model, sometimes it's so much quicker for me just to do it myself. And the photos of me that I hate the least are the ones that are just like, I'm looking around, kind of confused, like waiting for something to happen. Like, I feel like if you're not a professional model, when you're candid, you're relaxed. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. Like if you're nervous and you're sitting up a little too straight, I think that there are some posture cues that you don't realize when you're trying, that when they aggregate, kind of remove you further and further from like a natural look. And when you're looking at it as an audience, you pick up on it even if you can't quantify it. So candids are like a great way to just go, okay, like nobody knows I'm here. I'm just gonna blend in, you do you, and I'll like, just trust me to find stuff that works. And that's why I think like wedding photos are so great, especially when people are coming out of their ceremony, because the last thing you could give any care about is like the photographer in front of you, but you just have this natural jubilation that just completely shines through. Those are the best smiles. And so I'm a huge
I always tell
fan
people
of
that like, if you don't know how to pose, or oftentimes somebody who isn't a model is in front of the camera says, I don't know what to do, I just say like, the first and the best thing you can do is just like laugh and smile and truly mean it, because that nobody can replicate that. Nobody can replicate that way that you smile. And it is as beautiful as can get. And even if you don't think so, because you're not used to, it's like hearing your own voice. It always sounds a little weird. Believe me, we have like a way of recognizing facial expressions that is, since our birth. So we see somebody smile genuinely, we're just going to be like, wow, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So one way to look absolutely gorgeous without Photoshop.
That's such a great insight. I always ask like the subject, like, what'd you do today? Just kind of like to get them talking. And then like, you'll see the guard come down like a little bit, and then we'll roll from there. But yeah, any exercises you have like that. And sometimes I'll try to assure the subject, like I might have you in a pose that's a little bit more esoteric, like where you're pointing and you're looking down and like you're just in a position that doesn't feel natural, but I'll show them right after I take the photo, like just in the frame, this ended up looking cooler than than it felt like doing, like especially with people's eyes. Like sometimes I'll be like, okay, like put your chin to your shoulder, but then with just your eyes, try to look over your other elbow, and you're like, my forehead, like my face hurts, but it ends up looking more normal than if like you actually just kind of rested where your eyes naturally go, because sometimes it just can be a little weird. But yeah, there are those like little tricks of the lens that as a model just feel so unnatural, but end up communicating in a way that's a little bit cooler. I don't know if I'm a fan of this treatment on this photo, and I already lost it, but I do want to go back to some of these presets here. I do love Delta. That's always a good one because it feels really warm, but sometimes the blues are a little too saturated.
Toren, as you explore the different filters, I have a few hellos here on the chat. Thanks everyone for joining us. So Sean says, Sean joined us on the question about the pasta. He says he's a fan of pesto, and I am a fan of pesto too, actually.
Yeah, same here. Pine nuts though are very expensive. And they're so hard to find in the grocery store. Like I've had meltdowns. Like where are we keeping all the pine nuts? Just, like all that work for them to still be $12 for like half a cup. Yeah, it's a lot.
And then Mervin here says, I like doing microphotography. Do you have any advice for that? So that's interesting to get even closer as opposed to like, just like or your initial shots, but like I think microphotography doesn't tend to get as much attention sometimes.
I'm unfamiliar with what microphotography is.
I guess like macro photography, insects.
Getting
so really like close. I imagine for your clothes, it could be like a good way to translate the fabric.
Yeah, I have some shots that are definitely closer, but again, like people who get like up close, especially if you're doing insects, I breathe way too heavy. So that's like not a career path for me. Like I would just upset the animals. But as far as like fabrics go, there are definitely some shots that I took later on, that were much, much closer. And this photo shoot was pretty cool in that I've always, because I'm self-taught, I've always relied on just like the automatic settings. And this was the first time where I took all the training wheels off and was like, okay, I'm going to put this into focus myself. I'm going to set the white balance myself. Like all of this I'm going to do on my own. And so that was really cool. But I'm like, when I'm at a shoot, I have a tendency, it's like a bad habit to kind of rush. And this forced me to really slow down in between.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hold the close-up of the title is really interesting. So
it
could be a good use of like just getting a little closer.
Yeah, no, this one's cool. And you can tell, like I train in this shirt. Lex is just a champ for allowing herself to wear one of my old nasty t-shirts. But this shirt meant a lot. The hold hands one, like I saw last summer that there were so many shirts that had captions on it that really felt like they were more for Instagram. Like you ever see a t-shirt, like who would wear that out? But it photos well. It's like this caption seems very intentional. It's like you're wearing it for a different audience than the people you're actually in front of. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to have a t-shirt that has a declarative on it, like what would be like my commandment? Like what would I ask people to do? And so I was like, oh, okay, commandment, cool. So I downloaded like the same font, like the Bible script standard. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to ask that people hold hands. And so that was like my declarative shirt for last summer. And I had it made on like a champion shirt. So it's got this boxy look. And I like a boxier cut t-shirt. And so these shirts have been my absolute favorite. And I have one in black and white and white and black. And yeah, these photos are some of my, or this shirt is like of my absolute favorite. And I wear it all the time. And I should probably buy more for myself. But I like that like weather, because it's a heavy shirt. Like I like that it's beaten up now. And hopefully that translates a little bit with this photo. What I might end up doing, like I love the way that this blue ended up working, but I might do I love the new masking tools for select subject. When I'm in Photoshop, that lasso whoops my ass, Sin. I am the worst at it. Oh my God. I get so mad trying to lasso with my mouse. Like, why can't I? And
this has been amazing.
Yeah, it's the absolute, it's literally magic. Like I'm so
grateful
fairly
new, but it's really good.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then
I feel like they listened to us, or like we just want to stay in Lightroom. We don't want to jump to Photoshop.
No, I have a question for you. You might know better than I do. Can you export this to Photoshop with the layer mask included? It's like a separate layer in the Photoshop file.
I'm not entirely sure, actually, but I would imagine that's a great step if they haven't implemented it. I wonder if in the three dots at the very bottom, if it gives you an option to do that, to export. You see it next to show overlay.
Oh, the ellipsis? Here?
The ellipsis, yeah, but on the inside. The one to you see show overlay, and then there's an ellipsis. I imagine that could be some options.
Oh, here, yeah.
Yes. So color overlay, overlay settings. No, but I really like that concept. I wonder if there's an option. If anybody knows in the chat, it might have been, if we thought about it, that might have been already a step.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this is a nice intel for the coders of Adobe.
Yeah, because there are definitely some times where it's like, man, like I would love this clipping mask, which is like kind of perfect to insert something that may not be the photo itself, like a texture or a pattern or one of the things I had to teach myself how to do pretty early on was to do a displacement map, because I had so many clients that I was designing shirts for, and they're like, can you just make it look like it's on a t-shirt? And I was like, okay, sure. Like I have no clue what that even means.
Right.
And then I started like doing the different blend modes in Photoshop. And I was like, why doesn't it look wrinkled? And so 6 hours later, I learned the term displacement map. And
nice.
Now I love making those. Yeah, but it would be nice sometimes to just be like, okay, I can start here and then make my own displacement map using the subject select and Lightroom, which is so accurate. Because that lasso in Photoshop
so accurate.
beats me up.
I mean, the sensei just detects everything. I mean, this is a challenging image because she has this the curly hair, but also strands of hair like just floating about. That, I mean, a lifetime ago feels like, but when I first started Photoshop, it was just like a nightmare. And you would be the coolest if you could figure that out and spend all the hours to be able to like, just mask it in a certain way. Definitely not the pen tool. The pen tool will not do that. And so this ability of the sensei being able to detect that immediate subject selection, that's amazing.
Yeah. And so it's huge, like, because sometimes like when I'm doing like the minus subject select in Photoshop, I'll hit like a pixel and then 10% of the subject select just disappears and I'll get heated. So this is so useful.
I know exactly.
I love it. Yeah. You're like, no, like what am I touching to make all this disappear? It just, it can't just be me. So I'm glad that we share each other's pain in that regard. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this. I don't know how the chat feels about this photo, but I'm going to flag this one.
I really like it. I love the perspective on this one. And that like my focus goes directly to the friends of the Unresolved, which is so cool.
which is my apparel brand name. I love unresolved like lines on graphs. And so when I started my apparel brand, I was like, well, anybody who's a friend of mine is a friend of some of the things that I like. And so friend of the unresolved, because I feel like there's so much in our own lives that, we don't get to put a cap on quite yet. And so while I'm on this journey and I'm just getting started, like it's people who are supporting me through however they can means a lot. And so I wanted to name my apparel brand after the friends who've gotten me this far to begin with.
Ooh,
lovely.
We're here celebrating Pride Month, and I love what you just said there, because sometimes all it takes is an ally to allow you to feel comfortable within yourself and be able to be expressive. And how can we be creative if we don't have those outlets to just completely be honest and follow our own narrative and our own gut feeling, right? Isn't that beautiful? So an ally goes a long, long way. So this is a shout out to all of you allies out there. Bravo.
Yeah. That's I'm curious what your feelings are towards how the month is demonstrated at like a corporate marketing level, just because you're so into the weeds in this field. Like, do you see things that feel disingenuous, or are you encouraged just by like any motion in this direction? How do you feel about it?
In terms of Pride, is that what you're specifically?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you're comfortable, sorry, I probably should have asked you what you're...
I'm not uncomfortable. So it's really interesting because for me, I live in Texas and in Austin, Texas. So Austin is so friendly and so in love with just people being different. So I've seen so many rainbows everywhere, beautiful notes of just love everybody and like love yourself and be yourself and all these wonderful statements that from a graphic design standpoint, all I can think of is how does that affect the community when there's statements of love as opposed to statements of hostility. I grew up in Miami, Florida, which unfortunately I have to say this, but there is very little celebration if it doesn't involve a party or other, you know, like there's a lot of benefit, you're benefiting from celebrating this thing as opposed to just I just want to be for you guys, here for you guys. I'm going to show a sticker on the door and tell you that you're welcome here and that it's okay to show your love, you know. So seeing that stark difference here and seeing the celebration that happens everywhere, it warms my heart. I remember the first time that I genuinely saw a rainbow flag, and I thought to myself, well, because I've seen them many times before, but for the first time that I saw it, and I felt a sense of community because I was accepting myself too. So it was like, wow, that little flag up there made me feel just a little bit more comfortable to hold my wife's, she was my girlfriend back then, her hand in the street. So it's so silly, but at the same time, it's not, because isn't that the point of everything we make? It involves some kind of action or emotion that gets translated over to the person who experiences it, and that's when it's beautiful, right? Like that's when it kind of does its whole journey. So I'm still in kind of developing my opinion on it, I would say, because my eye is just browsing and seeing things for the first time in a space that is actually embracing pride. And I imagine it's more like this in other states. I mean, the Castro district in San Francisco is amazing. It's like so much fun. Unfortunately. I was there and it was just like, whoa, this is so cool. And it's all over the place. And it's statements of like, just so talking about conviction, right? Statements of conviction. And so that's just beautiful. This just brings me back to just all your concepts. And I love that. It makes a difference when you're designing something with a sense of conviction, because you never know who is going to wear something or put a poster up on their wall that's going to kind of motivate them for the day. I mean, it can make a world of a difference in that respect.
Is there anything that you're not seeing in how Pride Month is approached that you wish that you saw more of, or some form of representation that you think hasn't gotten its due diligence?
I don't know if I have a fair response, since I haven't been too in the depths of marketing and social media as of late. And that's kind of refreshing in a way. But say if I have experienced a lapse in the past, it would be just representing, for me, this is close to me, is the Latinx community and their perspective on being in the LGBTQ plus community, because our experience is completely different, coming from very, very, very conservative families, and that tends to just change the experience of coming out altogether. So again, allies are just become almost like a chosen family, and just so much love that it involves to be open-minded, open-minded to somebody else's experience, and in the same front of educating myself on subjects that matter to you, for example, or subjects that you're taking on in your brand, to be able to be inclusive or be representative of the Black community, all of those things were things I educated myself on. And I realized this is a lot of work, but my gosh, did I need to do this? Like, I just needed to do this. So I love that brands are taking on that narrative more and more, because it's less hush hush and it allows me to learn in different avenues. Be it wearing a shirt, like, sure, I know why I stand for this shirt. So it's really cool stuff.
It's really refreshing to hear. I'm always really curious as to what people's experiences are with how they feel their identities are portrayed by other hands. And it can be frustrating at times and heartbreaking at others. And then when it does work, it's like, like you said, very refreshing. So
keep it up, because that's the right outlet. Just kind of follow your gut on that respect. And even if sometimes it translates into our post editing, we start to be like, how, why would I make this look scary if it doesn't have a meaning? Or why would I make it look super saturated if it's not really me? How sustainable is that, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's all such great insight. Like it really does affect your approach to things, like especially from like a connotative viewpoint. Like you can have a photograph of a Black male, and if it's in two different sets of hands, have them be treated in two very different ways. That's so true. Like sometimes, like just in color grading, like people don't realize that they're making somebody darker, and maybe, we're not thinking about where this photo is being used. And, this idea of, not being mindful of maybe the historical context for the identity of the subject and the photos that you've taken can be tough. And I don't begrudge people who aren't aware, but I always like to think that it's not who's in the room who said yes, it's who wasn't in the room to say no. And I've definitely like jumped in front of brands making a few really bad ideas before that I know came from a really good place. Just well-intentioned isn't always well-informed. And it's great to hear that you've got your finger on the pulse of what's working and what isn't. And
likewise on your end.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying. I am a constant work in progress. And last year for Pride Month,
aren't we all?
I wanted. But I'm a little behind. But I wanted to. Like, I'm a big fan of pledging time, and donating time to things. And there were a couple of LGBT or LBGTQ plus resources that.
It's a mouthful.
I should do a better job of it. So my apologies, but they were offering kind of not like classes, but like mentorships and just some time that I could spend. And I really do like doing stuff like that where I'm learning in real time from people who are comfortable with sharing, because it can be tough. Like having been the only person of color in a business before, sometimes you are the one who has to answer a lot of questions. And while I'm comfortable doing so, it's not necessarily somebody else's job to like educate me on things that I should probably be aware of. So I never take for granted when people are comfortable with it, explaining it and being patient with me and generous with their experiences so that they can explain it. But I am a big fan of this picture. I did a hat for KESA. My wife's whole family are huge Buffalo Bills fans. And I don't like football, to be honest with you. But I was like, if I'm going to like football, I'm going to do it on my own terms and design some stuff around it. And especially with everything that just happened in Buffalo, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that this hat is in this shoe. It's actually the one I'm wearing right now. And Lex being from Buffalo and not too far from where that shooting was, it's crazy sometimes, like, how much can be in a photo without anybody knowing, because there's just no way to convey that context. But this one in particular means a lot to me, just having Thurston in the background, literally on the corner of where I grew up. And I told Lex during the shoot, I was like, this is literally my dream, like to be able to represent my street in a way that's positive and strong and thoughtful, and then to have you here just kind of like
powerful,
just so powerful and so focused, and wearing clothes that have lived the life for the past year of me while I'm trying to figure out, because when you start off on your own as a freelancer or as a contract hire, you don't realize it, but while you're learning new skills and a technical sense towards your art, you're also learning like how to run a business. And man, like there are so many lessons that nobody tells you, and I bumped my head on just about all of them. But it can be daunting at times, like especially because I'm pretty naive. Like you wouldn't believe some of the horror stories of people who leave you with a bag. Like you do all the work for them and then they just don't pay you, or stuff like that gets weird. And there are protections that you can put in place for yourself. legally,
Yeah.
but until you've made that mistake, it's like it wouldn't occur to you, or at least it didn't occur to me to kind of think with those things in mind. So
Do you,
it's been a lot to learn.
yeah, do you ever include like any, I know in the info section of Lightroom, do you ever include any metadata to make sure people like it involves your name, so that if things do get, kind of taken advantage of, then you have like somewhere to just make a remark, this is actually mine. Because I know a lot of
Um,
people are familiar with the signature, but maybe not so much about the metadata behind it all.
I have been recently for like, especially videos that I output. For photos, I haven't always done the best job, and like in a weird way, like I've always been so confident, like hard work always rises to the top. And so if somebody like really, really loves something that I've done and they're wondering like where it came from, no matter where they stumble upon it, if they really dig it, it will cross paths. And I have not always been too worried about people stealing like my ideas or my concepts, just because I feel like I'll just keep having them. And so that's been both like a good like modus operandi and also a bad one, because I've definitely had some pitch decks that I sent to clients that were like, well, we're going to go in a different direction, and I more or less saw what I pitched them just with somebody else. But that definitely happens. But no, to answer your question,
Yeah.
I've not done a good job with using that metadata tool here in
It's interesting all the lessons we learn, right? Like
oh my
just
goodness, yeah.
yeah.
Man, she
So
is.
can you just as we kind of get closer here towards
Yeah,
the
yeah.
end, can you give us a summary on how we're going to move forward tomorrow with
Yeah,
our
yeah.
project? Yeah.
Yeah, so tomorrow, I'll go when we're offline. I'll finish kind of color grading these, and then tomorrow we'll start bringing them into Adobe Creative Cloud Express, just to start doing those like social placements and getting these ready to kind of launch on my social channels, and just kind of talk through. Maybe we'll do like an Instagram post, and then like an Instagram story post, and then kind of walk you guys through how iterative I am with that, with just where I place the logos, and then maybe we'll even post a few while we're live, and take it from there. And if there is time, maybe walk through like an editorial or something along the lines, because I love putting together editorials. It's like my absolute favorite. But yeah,
What do you
this has
use
been
for the
absolutely incredible.
editorial?
InDesign.
We still have time. Don't worry.
Oh,
We
okay.
still
Yeah,
have
no, I was
time
like,
to
oh
hang out.
shoot. Yeah.
um,
Um,
you use InDesign for editorials. Oh, cool. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's the place to be. Do you use Adobe Express?
Yep. So I'll
Oh,
switch
okay.
between the two, like depending
Ah,
on what I need. Like if I need like a quick social placement, InDesign seemed a little robust for that. So if it's like, man, like I have an idea, I've got a photo, let me just create a project in Express. And one of the things I love the most about Express is that it really lowers the barrier to entry for people who are just getting started. So with like a lot of the students that I work with now who are in Rochester's inner city, there are a lot of hurdles to clear financially if you want to do this even kind of as a hobby. Just like, you have the equipment to take the photos you want, do you have the computer to run Lightroom in a way that's workable. But with Express, everything's kind of handled offline or like remotely through like their server, so you can get into some ground level graphic design and editorial design and placement design without needing to have everything. And I think that's
right.
I can't overstate how important that is to make it more ubiquitous. Like I'm a huge fan of the democratization of skills and assets, and the
Yes.
more people who have access to stuff, the better.
Yeah. Also, it's just being able to have those creative assets to communicate your brand is really wonderful.
Yeah.
Actually, this reminds me, there's always a opportunity for you to replay any of these videos on Behance or YouTube, where you can find other creators, like, for example, Voodoo Val, who actually worked on a project with Adobe Express
Oh,
for
wow.
social posts. So you can also check that out. I love being able to check out the replays, although we'd lose the really cool factor of joining the chat. So definitely say hello in the chat if you just joined us, or if you're ready to join us tomorrow. Make sure to keep up with that. yeah, as we continue here with Toren on all of the different Lightroom photos, and we'll continue editing. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the chat or
Let
anything?
me
I know
check
I'm
them
like
out. I know
talking at a million miles per hour.
Hassan said, hi, and then I want to download Photoshop in Windows 10 for free. Can you please help me? For free. I mean, honestly, like you don't have to get the entire Adobe Creative Cloud. I think that there's different subscription methods, right? Like I have the entire Adobe Creative Cloud because I can't help myself. It's like once you learn one, it's so easy to learn the next, and it just becomes like candy. So definitely check out Adobe and see if there's different options for you. I know they have a free trial also. Actually, Sam just touched on that. So they have a free trial and then a subscription based, which also unveils the different features once you're subscription based. I know with Lightroom, you have accessibility to some filters that were created within Lightroom to help for situations like being able to edit skin color so that you're able to stay true to your subjects or color and kind of have some presets there so that you don't have to kind of start from scratch. Those are available within the subscription.
I'm rolling through them right now. I think the premium presets.
Yeah,
these are cool.
Yeah, those are cool. And then there's also other cool, more creative ones like cinematic and sometimes I use them. Yeah, sometimes I use them as like a base of foundation. So that you're still able to edit them. They're not fixed in place. Yeah. So you can always kind of go from there and say, man, I want it a little cooler, or actually I want it more contrasted. And at least
I love a good launching point. Yeah, that's huge. I just cinematic CN11. I am feeling.
Oh.
Yeah. It's tough though, because I'm looking at this on two different screens, and the screen in front of me, it's not so saturated, and then on the other one, it's super saturated. And
that's so tricky.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, which version are people seeing on their feeds? Because they either think that I'm like dead inside or super candy, and I don't know. I don't know which one to do. By tomorrow I will have this problem solved for sure. But even just going through like just emotionally, like my thought process for the project and Lex and making sure she's comfortable with the photos and how she wears the clothes. Again, these are the remember our first date shorts. Like actually, I think we touched up this photo. This is an outfit I wear all the time. These are actually my glasses. And I thought it was really cool to see Lex wearing, well, I've had the shirt since 2016 at least the earliest, but where is that outfit? Because I've worn it. I love this fit. I wear it all the time. And so to see somebody else in it, and I was like, Lex, you're so much cooler than me. It's like, I feel like finally like the captain of the football team's here and I'm like a replacement player. And now like I have to go back to the bench in my own outfit. Like I've worn this every day for a year, and you've made it look way cooler at your first attempt. And I'm kind of upset about it, but God bless.
Very comfy too.
Yeah, no. And that's like my thing. Like I love being comfortable. I think it was Jerry Lorenzo who kind of came up with this concept of like American, like luxury leisure. And like the whole fear of God vibe is very much that. And he's been a huge point of inspiration for me just in validating myself as a creative and having the nerve to call myself an artist and validating my approach where like I'm so conviction driven. And I really do like honor like my gifts and talents and try to put those at the forefront. And, where I can't do a good job or I can't do something to the best of my abilities, like I am willing to say no to a project. And a lot of those cues I got from listening to Jerry Lorenzo. I think I stumbled upon him back in 2018 because he was coming out with the Fear of God sneaker with Nike, and it's this brand new silhouette. I don't know if you're into sneakers at all, but a lot of designers will get like an existing silhouette of sneaker to like put their own spin on. Almost never does somebody get their own sneaker mold from the ground up. So like you'll see like designers design like a Jordan 1 or Jordan 4. but to have like a completely brand new silhouette almost never happens. And he got one for his first collaboration with Nike. And when they was asking him about it, he was like, I honored this so much that if I couldn't do it to the best of my abilities with my gifts and my talents, I was willing to say no. And so that sneaker ended up being like, it's my favorite sneaker of all time. And I have 4 pairs of them, but just kind of having like somebody believe in themselves that much where they'd walk away from Nike because they could do it on their own terms was such a liberating idea. And I didn't even realize how important that would be moving forward. Because I was working at a different agency when I stumbled upon that interview. And now it's like, that is like woven into the DNA of KESA, just that I'm going to do this to the best of my abilities with my own skill set. And I'll say no to stuff that doesn't live up to that standard.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to stay in tune with what is that standard for you, or what does it mean for you, so that, okay, I can detect this doesn't coincide with that. So I can say no and be happy and be okay with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Are there any photos in particular that the chat is feeling that they want to see kind of carried over to tomorrow?
I mean, definitely.
About it.
I really like that one with the perspective underneath.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one's really cool.
Yeah, this one's,
and
this one's dope.
Also that one.
This one? Yeah.
She's
she's so funny. I was like, Lex, perch up like Spider-Man on the bench, which is like, this is from like my kitchen. And she like immediately like did like this. And I was like, not like Lex, like not like literally like Spider-Man. Then she started laughing, but this is actually like a semi-candid photo because she's laughing from me teasing her. And like I love moments like this. Like this isn't like an occurrence. Like I could never have planned for a moment like that. And I feel so lucky that I was able to have it, and then to be able to share it with the world, like, growing up and going to a prep school. Yeah, for people who are just entering the chat now, like I went to a very, like a nice prep school in the suburbs, and there were friends of mine whose parents wouldn't let them spend the night at my house because where I lived made them nervous. And I'd never felt like that reputation of my street was fair or accurate. And to have an opportunity now to show the world, no, this is really where I came from. Like there's beauty here and there's safety here. And I had some of my best memories from being a kid up until last weekend when we did this shoot come from this humble place. And when I started KESA, my very first brand tagline was good things can come from anywhere. And it was in reference to this. And now to be able to show that to the audience here on Behance is something that I do not take for granted. So for everybody who's popped in, thank you. And send to you as well. Thank you so much for being such an awesome, generous, thoughtful host.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually Phil here says the Spider-Man shot was their favorite too. So you hit that one on the target. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, I think it's one as well.
It's one of those things that, like, to be able to reconcile your relationship with a place you grew up with and be able to represent or express something that's a bit more accurate to the actual narrative. Like I noticed there was an image you had where you were in an abandoned location, it looked like. And I was like, my head went, whoa, cool. There was one that I think maybe it was right at the start. But yeah, there was like a location that's a bit tagged up, and it reminded me of a spot that's familiar to me in Miami too, that it's for better or worse, it's abandoned, but it ends up being taken over by like really cool artwork that most people would denounce as this is just street like stuff. But in reality, it's actually folks that maybe don't have too much accessibility for technology or anything like that. And they find an outlet to be creative. And isn't that worth celebrating at the end of the day?
Yeah. No, I love the texture. Like I'm a huge fan. It's funny that you mentioned it. Like I love areas that have been like reclaimed, like generationally. So like you have like the original structure, and then life just kind of happens and there's graffiti all over it, and then eventually those people move away, and then like literally like plants overtake it, and then you've just got like these different layers, and it's like whenever you see like a cut of stone, and it's like, oh, like this a bit of crust is from the Jurassic period. Like I love that people can kind of take those core samples, and I try to, or at least I have in the back of my mind when I'm having things in the background. And Rochester is really funny where like there are these little angles where it looks like a completely different place. Because for the most part, it's kind of your standard city. But every now and again, you get this like little flair, like this little accent of something a little bit different. And where I shot this on Westfall Road, you would drive right past it and never know that that's where that photo was taken. And I love that we were able to kind of explore and find that. But yeah, this area was super tagged up. And I ended up, while I was shooting, I had a pair of LeBrons on, and a nail went right through the bottom of my shoe. And yeah, it just managed to not stab me in the foot. So Lex was like, "You have tetanus now?" And I was like, "I probably do." And then it turns out I'm still here. But yeah,
but more importantly,
I love
you lost a shoe.
No, so actually somehow the airbag didn't deflate. So I got very lucky. And then I don't have tetanus and everything worked out.
There you go. Fancy shoes.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, these are so fun. But yeah, I'll go through the rest of these for tomorrow, and then we'll load them up. I think I have a sense of what people like color grading wise. And this photo also is a fan favorite. I just love that she's so great. Like I cannot speak to Lex's superpowers enough. Yeah, this whole vibe is just, it's so crazy.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like tripping over the fact that it happened. Yeah.
Do you have from our conversation today, do you have a few tips that you would like the audience that maybe just caught on to keep in mind? Yeah,
from any perspective. So if you're conducting a photo shoot, always check in with the subjects. They're lending themselves to you, even if they're professional. They're still trusting you with their time and their likeness, and that's important. So make sure that whatever you're doing, everybody's as comfortable as possible. And I think sometimes like you can ask somebody, "Are you comfortable with something?" and they might just acquiesce because they don't want to ruffle feathers. So if you get the sense that they're not comfortable with it, just pivot. And then that kind of starts to speak to people that they are empowered to vocalize their concerns in real time and that you will address them. And then from the actual Lightroom portion of things, iterate, try different things, spend time with stuff, push yourself a little bit. Now that I know that there are the new premium presets, I will definitely I will play around with these and, allow yourself to use whatever you're doing as a launching point, and trust that, whatever your commitment level is to the work itself, that outweighs how many people end up liking it, how many impressions it gets served across wherever you're placing it. Like the time that you get to spend just like, I don't know, at least for me, just to be able to say, "Oh my goodness, like I've had this weight on my shoulders for 34 years of people mischaracterizing where I'm coming from. And now I get to show people that it's vastly different from what they assumed it was." Right. That to me, it's like the photos could be off. I'm shocked I'm not crying. Like the photos could be terrible, but just like spend some time in that space and appreciate that that's the opportunity that you're working on. And if you're working on a project that doesn't speak to you, maybe not to that degree, but to any degree, then maybe reconsider. Life is so short.
Right. Sometimes it's not so much about reinventing wheels, but or creating, innovating and all these grand things, but sometimes it's about revisiting something that needs a little polishing, like to be told a little bit better. Yeah. A little bit more genuinely. Yeah. And I think that's wonderful, because sometimes that gets overseen, and I've just been like, okay, well, that's the standard. It's status quo. What else can we do?
And even I think you mentioned it earlier, but because it's authentic to you, you're going to treat something in a different way than somebody might if it isn't authentic to them. So you may not be attributing what you're doing as something new, but in all honesty, like it probably is. Like you are problem solving. Like if you're being mindful, like one thing is as a Black subject in photos, sometimes the way people color grade just makes Black people look weird, and you can almost always tell like that the person wasn't aware of that. And that's something that I'm always very mindful of. God forbid I'm standing in front of like a wood background, because my camera just thinks that I'm wood colored, and then the computer kind of registers it as like some shade of orange, and then everything gets wonky. And so like I know that that's something that happens not just to me, but people of my skin tone. So I'm reluctant to have people in the foreground of like a wood background, and that's like a framing thing that not every photographer may be aware of.
Mind.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Or even like the color palettes that you might choose ahead of time, if you're trying to keep brand consistency, you might want to take in consideration your subject and say, well, how can I be more inclusive and make sure like I started to do this thing in my wardrobe where like I started to stop buying black shirts because one, they attract the sun, so I'm more hot. But I live in Texas. It's really hot.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. But two, like I realized I really enjoy like wearing white shirts. So if that's my thing, then I'm going to buy more of that. Yeah. And so whenever there's a version or iteration of that style, but like in white, I'll buy it. And I'm like, yes, I'm sure I'm going to wear this much more than I would any other thing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting sometimes not to like when I think about it, I think I did that decision subconsciously because I love how my skin color looks on that shirt as opposed to a black shirt, which is something to like kind of reconcile with when you're a brand, to say like, how can I best represent this person's skin color and maybe highlight it in a beautiful way with the brand, like clothes or, whatever it may be. Such an interesting, I'm so glad we talk about this stuff now because it is such a beautiful point to consider. But yeah, Toren, I'm so happy that we've been able to chat today. I feel like we just dove into so many different parts of your branding and also the behind the scenes that was very, very insightful and very relatable. Can you let us know where we can find you for now, and also a little bit about tomorrow so we can get excited?
Yeah, of course. So there's my my Behance profile, which I think we shared. And then likewise on Instagram, if you follow me at KESA_design, I should pop right up.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everyone on the chat. See you tomorrow.